"Can I fix this?" whispered the grease-covered boy staring at the luxury car. The millionaire burst into cruel laughter, but in seconds that kid would do the unthinkable and silence everyone. The engine of the Rolls-Royce Phantom billowed smoke right in the middle of Wilshire Boulevard, causing a traffic jam that stretched for 5 blocks. Edward Sullivan slammed the steering wheel so hard that his gold ring scraped the imported leather. That car had cost him $500,000, and now it was stalled like junk in broad daylight, exposing his vulnerability for all to see. "This can't be happening," he muttered, sweat trickling down his forehead despite the air conditioning still running. Around him, drivers honked mercilessly, some yelling insults out their windows. Edward wasn't used to being treated like this. He owned Sullivan Imports, one of the biggest luxury car dealerships in the country, and now his own ride was betraying him in front of hundreds of people. He grabbed his phone and dialed the official dealership. "I need a tow truck now. My Phantom broke down on Wilshire." "Mr. Sullivan, our specialized tow is in service. It could take up to 2 hours," the operator replied with that irritating professional calm. 2 hours? Are you crazy? I'm not staying here for 2 hours being humiliated." "I'm sorry, sir, but that's the estimated time." Edward hung up on her, rage boiling inside. He glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the line of cars growing, people filming with their phones. This would become news memes jokes. The great Edward Sullivan luxury car expert with his own car broken down on the street. That's when someone tapped on the window. Edward turned ready to yell at whoever it was, but he stopped when he saw a boy about 12 years old covered in grease wearing an old torn t-shirt. His messy hair fell over his brown eyes, which stared with a strange intensity. "Need help, sir?" the boy asked, his voice thin but firm. Edward rolled down his window just enough to respond. "Get out of here, kid. I don't take charity." "I'm not asking for charity, sir. I'm offering help with the car." The laugh that escaped Edward's mouth was cruel and loud. "Help you a grubby kid want to help with a Rolls-Royce Phantom?" Dylan Sanders didn't flinch. He was used to that kind of reaction. "I know what's wrong from the sound the engine made before it stopped and the smoke it's overheating in the cooling system. Probably the water pump seized." Edward stopped laughing. How could this kid know that? "Listen, kid," he said, opening the door and stepping out. He towered at 6'1", nearly twice Dylan's height. "I don't know what game you're playing, but this car is worth more than your house. I'm not letting you put a dirty finger on it." "Then do you prefer to stay here until the tow comes?" Dylan asked, pointing to the growing line of cars. "Because from what I see, it's going to take a while." Edward looked around. People were getting out of their cars, complaining, some approaching with phones to film. This was turning into a public spectacle. "My dad works over there," Dylan pointed to a small, dingy garage a few yards away. "We've been fixing cars for years. Can I at least take a look?" "Your dad." Edward laughed again. "That back alley shop. What do you fix old Ford Chevys? This is a Rolls-Royce, kid. You have no idea of the complexity." At that moment, 3 men in suits approached. They were Edward's business partners who had been in the car right behind and witnessed the whole scene. "Edward, what's going on?" asked Arthur Vance, trying not to laugh at the situation. "The Phantom broke down," Edward replied, embarrassed. "And this kid?" asked another partner, looking Dylan up and down with disdain. "He says he can fix it," Edward said, and the 3 burst into laughter. "Oh, this I gotta see," Arthur said, pulling out his phone to record. "The kid from the fifth-rate garage is going to fix the luxury car expert's Rolls-Royce." "Make your jokes," Dylan said, his voice still calm but with a hint of challenge. "But if I fix it, how much do you pay me?" Edward looked at the boy with a mix of surprise and amusement. "Are you challenging me?" "I'm offering a service. Every service has a price." "Fine," Edward said, crossing his arms. "If you, a 12-year-old kid, get this $500,000 car running again, I'll pay you $500. The partners laughed even harder. $500, Edward? You gone crazy? Relax, he won't do it, but it'll be fun to watch him try. Dylan showed no emotion. $700. What? Edward nearly choked. $700. It's a fair price for the job and for the public humiliation I'm enduring now. Edward looked at his friends who were recording everything and laughing. This was already turning into social media content. Fine, kid, $700. But if you fail, you clean my car for free for a month. Deal. Dylan extended his grease-covered hand. Deal. Edward looked at the hand with disgust, but shook it anyway just to keep the show going. You can start your performance, he said with a sarcastic bow. Dylan didn't waste time. He ran to the garage and returned with a toolbox that seemed bigger than him. He set it down beside the Rolls-Royce and popped the hood with an ease that surprised even Edward. "He's really gonna do it," murmured Arthur, filming every move. Dylan dove into the engine like he knew every part by heart. His small hands moved with surgical precision, disconnecting hoses, checking connections, testing components. No hesitation, no wasted motion. "Come here," he said, after a few minutes, pointing to a specific part. "Water pump seized, just like I said." Edward approached incredulous. The kid had really diagnosed the problem correctly. "Diagnosing is easy," he said, trying to regain control. "Fixing is another story." "Watch," Dylan replied simply. What happened in the next 15 minutes left everyone silent. Dylan disassembled the water pump with impressive speed, cleaned the components, replaced a part he'd brought from the garage, and reassembled everything with the precision of a watchmaker. His fingers moved so fast it was hard to follow. "This is impossible," murmured Arthur, stopping his laughter. "He's a kid who knows what he's doing," added the other partner, genuinely impressed. Edward said nothing, just watched, feeling something strange in his chest. It wasn't admiration, he refused to admit that it was confusion. How could this kid know so much done? Dylan said, closing the hood and wiping his hands on an old rag. "You can start it now." "Can I start it?" Edward repeated, incredulous. "You really think—" "Start the car, Edward," Arthur said. "Let's see if the kid's a wizard or a fraud." Edward got in the car, his heart pounding. He didn't know what he wanted more, for it to work or not. He turned the key and the Rolls-Royce Phantom's engine roared to life, smooth and powerful as the day it left the factory. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the honking drivers stopped to process what they'd just witnessed. "No, this isn't possible," Edward murmured, staring at the dashboard showing all systems perfect. Dylan closed his toolbox. $700 as agreed. Edward got out of the car, his mind still trying to process what had happened. The partners were slack-jawed phones still recording. How did you learn this?" Edward asked, and for the first time there was no mockery in his voice. "My dad taught me," Dylan replied. "I've been working with him since I was 7. I've fixed over 200 cars already." "You're 12. And how old are you, 40, 50, and you couldn't even diagnose your own car's problem?" The response was like a slap. The partners laughed, but this time not at Dylan, at Edward. "Pay the kid, Edward," Arthur said. "He earned it." Edward pulled out his wallet, still dazed. He counted $700 in bills and handed them to Dylan, who took the money and counted it again in front of everyone. "Thanks for the business, sir," he said, pocketing it. "Wait," Edward said, grabbing the boy's arm. "Where did you learn about Rolls-Royces? These cars have complex systems, cutting-edge tech." "I learned by reading. I have all the technical manuals at home. My dad always says knowledge doesn't take up space. Technical manuals for Rolls-Royce, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Bugatti, all I can find online. I study every day after school." Edward looked at that grease-covered kid who'd just earned $700 fixing in 15 minutes a problem the dealership would take hours to solve, and felt something he hadn't in a long time. Humility. "What's your name?" he asked. "Dylan Sanders." "Dylan Sanders," Edward repeated. "You impressed me today." "Thanks, sir." Dylan picked up his toolbox and started walking back to the garage. Edward watched him go, feeling that something had changed that day. He'd been defeated by a kid, publicly humiliated, but strangely, he didn't feel rage. "Edward," Arthur called. "Did you see what I saw? I saw a 12-year-old fix a Rolls-Royce in 15 minutes. "No." Arthur showed his phone. "I see this on the screen." The video he'd recorded already had 15,000 views and was being shared frantically. People weren't laughing at Edward. They were impressed with Dylan. "The kid's gone viral," Arthur said. "Look at the comments." Edward read some. "This kid's a genius. I want him fixing my car. Talent has no age. The millionaire had to swallow his pride." Edward closed his eyes. That day should have been humiliating, but somehow he felt he'd learned something important. "Let's go," he said, getting into the now perfectly running Rolls-Royce. "I have work to do." But as he drove back to the office, he couldn't stop thinking about the kid Dylan Sanders, a name he wouldn't forget anytime soon. What Edward didn't know was that this encounter was just the beginning. Fate was about to intertwine their lives in a way neither could imagine. Dylan entered the garage with the $700 in his pocket, his heart still racing from the adrenaline. Michael Sanders, his father, was under an old Honda, only his legs visible. The sound of tools echoed in the small cramped space that served as both garage and almost home for the two. "Dad, you won't believe what happened," Dylan said, pulling the money from his pocket. Michael slid out from under the car, his face marked by wrinkles from a lifetime of hard work. He was 42, but looked 10 years older. He wiped his hands on a rag and looked at his son with tired but loving eyes. "What did you do now, son?" "I fixed a Rolls-Royce Phantom on the street and earned this." Dylan showed the money, the bills still crisp and fresh-smelling. Michael looked at it, totally incredulous. $700. "Dylan, where did you get this money?" "I swear, Dad, a Rolls-Royce broke down right in front of the garage. The owner was an arrogant guy who laughed at me. He bet I couldn't fix it. I did it in 15 minutes. Michael took the money, counting the bills as if they might disappear any moment. "Son, this is 4 months' rent. This is food on the table. This is proof I taught you well." Dylan finished smiling. Tears formed in Michael's eyes. He hugged his son tightly, feeling immense pride mixed with deep sadness. Dylan was brilliant, talented, capable of things he himself could never achieve, but all that was being wasted in a neighborhood garage fixing old cars for peanuts. "You deserve more than this, Dylan," Michael said, his voice choked. "You deserve to study at a good school, have real teachers, not be stuck here in this dingy garage." "Dad, don't say that. You taught me everything. You're the best teacher I could have. But I can't give you what you need. I can't afford private school technical courses, college." "We'll make it, Dad. With this money we can start saving." Michael nodded, wiping his eyes. "You're right. We'll save. We'll make this money stretch." What neither knew was that at that exact moment, Edward Sullivan was in his luxury office watching the video of Dylan fixing the Rolls-Royce go viral on social media. It already had 500,000 views and was growing exponentially. "This is incredible," said Caroline Sullivan, entering her father's office with her phone in hand. At 17, she was everything Edward expected of a daughter, smart, beautiful, educated, but lately she'd been questioning her father's values more and more. "Dad, have you seen the video? It's over 500,000 views already." "Seen it," Edward replied dryly, shuffling papers on his desk. "And don't you think it's amazing, a 12-year-old fixing a Rolls-Royce?" "I think he got lucky, probably saw the problem before on another car." "Lucky, Dad, he diagnosed it just from the sound. That's pure talent." Edward sighed. He hated to admit it, but his daughter was right. That kid had something special, something he himself lacked despite all his millions. "What do you want me to do, Caroline? Give him a trophy. I want you to recognize talent when you see it. That kid could be working for you, learning more, growing. He's a 12-year-old. There are labor laws, Caroline. I can't just hire a kid. But you can help. You can pay for courses, a better school. And why would I do that?" Caroline looked at her father with disappointment. "Because you have the power to change his life. Because you have enough money not to even notice it's gone. Because it would be the right thing." Edward fell silent. His daughter had the irritating gift of always hitting the right wounds. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "Don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't wait." Caroline left the office, leaving Edward alone with his thoughts. He watched the video again, paying attention to every detail. The way Dylan moved, the confidence in his gestures, the surgical precision that wasn't luck. It was years of practice, study, dedication. And then he saw something he hadn't noticed before. In the background of the video, for a few seconds, the garage where Dylan had gotten the tools appeared. It was a tiny place with old equipment peeling walls, but above the door was a sign, Sanders & Son, General Mechanics. "Sanders & Son," Edward murmured. "So, the father really is a mechanic?" He picked up his phone and called his personal assistant. "Leonard, I need you to investigate a garage for me. Sanders & Son on Wilshire Boulevard, near where my car broke down today." "Investigate, sir." "What do you want to know?" "Everything. How long it's been in business, financial situation, owner's history. I want a full report by tomorrow morning." "Yes, sir." Edward hung up and watched the video again. It had nearly 1 million views. People were sharing, commenting, making edits. Dylan Sanders had become a little internet celebrity in a matter of hours. That night, in the simple house Michael and Dylan shared in a rundown neighborhood, father and son were eating rice and eggs when Dylan's phone started buzzing nonstop. "What's going on?" Michael asked, worried. Dylan grabbed the phone, his eyes widening. "Dad, the video from today has 1 million views." "1 million how?" "People are sharing it. Look at the comments." Michael read some, incredulous. This kid is more competent than many certified mechanics. Someone hire this kid before another country steals him. America wasting talents as always. I want to bring my car just for him to fix it. Son, this is serious. People are recognizing you. But that's good. It could bring more customers to the garage. Michael was about to respond when there was a knock at the door. It was late past 10 p.m. He went to open it cautiously and found an elegant woman in her 40s with a microphone and a cameraman behind her. "Good evening. I'm Pat Moore from CNN. We're looking for Dylan Sanders, the kid who fixed the Rolls-Royce today." Michael froze. "TV, how did you find Where We Live?" "The video's viral, sir. We did some digging and found the garage address. Neighbors pointed us to your house. Can we do a quick interview with Dylan?" "I don't know. He's a minor." "Dad, it's okay." Dylan appeared behind his father. "I want to talk." The reporter smiled. "Great. It can be right here at the door. It's quick." They turned on the cameras and Pat started. "I'm here with Dylan Sanders, the 12-year-old who went viral today fixing a Rolls-Royce Phantom right on Wilshire Boulevard. Dylan, how did you learn to do this?" Dylan looked at the camera naturally. "My dad taught me from a young age. He's the best mechanic there is." Michael felt his eyes fill with tears again. "And how did you know what to do with such a complex car?" "I study. I read technical manuals, watch videos, practice every day. Every car is a machine, and every machine has logic. You just have to understand how the parts work together." "Do you plan to pursue a career in this field?" "Yes. I want to study mechanical engineering, open my own company someday, but first I need to help my dad grow our garage." "And what would you say to the people watching?" Dylan thought for a moment. "That talent has nothing to do with money or fancy schools. It has to do with dedication. My dad taught me that. He never had much, but he always had wisdom." The interview lasted just 5 minutes, but when it aired on the evening news, it made an even bigger impact. People not only admired Dylan's skill, but identified with his story of overcoming odds. Edward watched the interview at home alone in his massive living room. He listened to every word Dylan said, saw how the boy spoke of his father with love and respect. He felt something strange in his chest, a mix of admiration and envy. His own son had died 5 years ago in a car accident. He was the same age as Dylan at the time. Since then, Edward had thrown himself into work, amassing wealth, but losing the ability to feel. Caroline was all he had left, but he knew he was losing her too with his arrogance and coldness. "Dad, did you see the interview?" Caroline entered the room. "I saw it." "And don't you feel like helping? Doing something?" Edward stayed silent for a long moment. "What do you want me to do, Caroline?" "I don't know, but you have resources. Contacts, power. That kid has talent. Together you could what? I don't need a partner, much less a 12-year-old. It's not about you needing him, it's about him needing you." "And why is that my problem?" Caroline looked at her father sadly. "Because before you became this cold, calculating person, you were a good man. Remember when Ryan was alive? You said you wanted to leave a legacy, make a difference in people's lives." The name of his dead son hit Edward like a punch. "Don't talk about Ryan. If anyone has to talk, do you think he'd be proud of what you've become? A man who has everything but shares nothing." "Get out of here, Caroline. You don't need to hear this. That kid is the age Ryan was when he died. He has talent, dreams, a future. You can help him reach that future." "I told you to leave," Edward shouted, standing from the couch. Caroline backed away, tears in her eyes. "You're impossible," she said before running out. Edward was left alone again, shaking with rage and pain. He hated when Caroline brought up that topic. He hated remembering the son he'd lost. He hated feeling anything. But that night when he finally went to sleep, he dreamed of Ryan. In the dream, his son was alive, smiling, playing with toy cars. And next to him was Dylan, teaching Ryan how to fix the little machines. "Dad," Ryan said in the dream, "Dylan's my friend. You're gonna help him, right?" Edward woke up sweating, heart racing. 3 a.m. He grabbed his phone and reread the report Leonard had sent about Sanders & Son. Founded 15 years ago. Owner, Michael Sanders, 42. Widower. Wife died 3 years ago from health complications. One son, Dylan Sanders, 12. Precarious financial situation. Debts to suppliers, rent overdue, obsolete equipment. Average monthly revenue, $3,500. Reputation in the neighborhood excellent. Known for honesty and good work. $3,500 a month. Edward spent more than that on a single meal at fancy restaurants, and this man was raising a genius on that pittance. He grabbed his phone and texted Leonard. "I want to schedule a meeting with Michael Sanders tomorrow in my office." He hesitated before sending. What did he want exactly? Why was he doing this? He couldn't answer those questions, but he hit send anyway. Leonard replied immediately. "Yes, sir. Preferred time noon." And Leonard, be polite when inviting. It's not an order, it's an invitation. "Understood, sir." Edward turned off his phone and stared at the ceiling. He felt like he was about to make a decision that would change everything. He didn't know if it was good or bad, but for the first time in 5 years, he felt he was doing something right. The next morning, Michael received a call from an unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Michael Sanders, good morning. My name is Leonard Andrade. I'm assistant to Mr. Edward Sullivan." Michael nearly dropped the phone. "Edward Sullivan, the Rolls-Royce owner?" "Exactly. Mr. Sullivan would like to invite you to a meeting today at noon in our office. Is that possible?" "A meeting about what?" "About your son, sir, and about opportunities." Michael looked at Dylan, who was organizing tools in the corner of the garage. "Opportunities?" "Yes, sir. Mr. Sullivan was very impressed with Dylan's talent and would like to discuss some possibilities. Can I confirm your attendance?" Michael didn't know if he should trust it, but something in Leonard's polite voice convinced him. "Okay, noon." Where Leonard gave the address and Michael wrote it down with shaking hands. "Dad, who was that?" Dylan asked when he hung up. "It was the Rolls-Royce guy. He wants to talk to us." "About what?" "I don't know, son, but I think we're gonna find out." At noon, Michael and Dylan were in front of the most luxurious commercial building in Los Angeles. Mirrored glass security at the door imported cars in the parking lot. They felt completely out of place in their simple clothes and grease-stained hands that no soap could fully clean. "Dad, I'm scared," Dylan whispered. "Me too, son, but we're going in." The security guard stopped them at the door. "Can I help you? We have a meeting with Mr. Edward Sullivan," Michael said, trying to sound confident. The guard checked a list and nodded. 40th floor, elevator on the right." As they rode up in the mirrored elevator, Michael and Dylan saw their reflections, two simple, hard-working men in a world not made for them. But when the doors opened, Leonard greeted them with a genuine smile. "Mr. Michael Dylan, welcome. Please follow me." They were led to a conference room with a panoramic view of the city. Edward was standing looking out the window with his back to them. "Mr. Sullivan, your guests are here," Leonard announced before leaving. Edward turned slowly. For the first time, Michael saw the man who had humiliated his son, but he also saw something in his eyes he didn't expect. "Mr. Michael Dylan, thank you for coming," Edward said, gesturing to the chairs. "Please sit. We have a lot to talk about." And as they sat, none of them imagined that conversation would change their lives forever. The conference room seemed even larger with the heavy silence that settled after Edward's invitation to sit. Michael pulled a chair for Dylan and then sat next to his son, sweaty hands on his knees. They'd never been in such a luxurious place. The solid wood table gleamed under the indirect light. The paintings on the walls probably cost more than the entire garage, and the floor-to-ceiling glass view of Los Angeles was breathtaking. Edward stayed standing for a few seconds studying the two. Father and son wore the same simple clothes from the day before, clean but worn from time and work. Both their hands had grease stains no soap could remove, completely permanent marks of those who work with their own hands. They were the absolute opposite of everything that office represented. "Want water? Coffee, juice?" Edward offered, trying to break the ice. "Water's fine, thanks," Michael replied, his voice lower than intended. Edward poured 3 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher and finally sat across from them. Dylan watched every move with those attentive eyes that missed no detail, the same focus he applied to studying engines and machines. "Mr. Michael Dylan," Edward began, clasping his hands on the table. "I called you because I need to say some things. First about yesterday." Michael straightened in his chair, ready to defend his son if necessary. "I was disrespectful, arrogant. I treated your son like he was incapable when he's actually extraordinarily talented." Edward paused, the words clearly costing his pride dearly. "I want to apologize to both of you." The apology caught Michael completely off guard. He'd expected many things, maybe a lawsuit for Dylan touching the car without formal permission, maybe a demand to return the money, even a threat, but a genuine apology from a man like Edward Sullivan that he didn't expect. "Mr. Sullivan," Michael said carefully, "my son did honest work. You paid the agreed amount. There's nothing to apologize for." "Yes, there is," Edward insisted. "I paid for the service, but not for the humiliations, the laughs, for treating him like he was less capable just because he's a kid and poor." The word poor echoed in the room like a gunshot. Dylan lowered his eyes and Michael felt rage starting to boil, but he controlled himself. "We are poor, Mr. Sullivan," Dylan said, suddenly lifting his eyes with a dignity that surprised even Edward. "But that doesn't mean we're stupid. My dad taught me that dignity has no price, and knowledge doesn't need money to be acquired." Edward smiled, a sad, almost melancholic smile. "Your father taught you well better than many rich parents teach their kids." There was a moment of silence where the three men, because Dylan, even at 12, acted like a man, measured each other with their eyes. "But I didn't call you here just to apologize." Edward continued, opening a folder on the table. "I investigated your garage." Michael tensed. "Investigated? Yes. I know you have debts to suppliers, rents, 3 months overdue, equipment's obsolete, and monthly revenue barely covers basic bills." "That's none of your business," Michael said, his voice harder now. "I know, and normally it wouldn't be. But after seeing your son's talent, after watching the interview last night, after seeing how you speak of each other with love and respect." Edward paused, breathing deeply. "I have a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" Michael asked, distrustful. Edward pulled out several documents from the folder. "I want to invest in your garage. I want to modernize it, equip it with state-of-the-art tools, create a training center specialized in luxury cars." Michael was slack-jawed. "Invest, why?" "Because America is full of wasted talents. People like Dylan who could change the world but are trapped in situations that don't allow growth. I have the money, you have the talent. Together we could create something extraordinary." "And what do you get out of it?" Michael asked, still distrustful. In his experience, rich people never did anything without getting something in return. "A share of the profits. 30% of the garage would be mine. You keep 70% and full control of operations. I just invest money and bring in high-end clients." Dylan looked at his father, trying to read his expression. Michael was processing the information, clearly torn between the opportunity and distrust. "How much investment are we talking about?" Michael asked. $500,000 initial, Edward replied calmly. Michael nearly fell out of his chair. $500,000, he stammered. "To start modern equipment, full renovation of the space, specialized training for you and Dylan, marketing, official certifications. I want to turn Sanders & Son into the go-to for luxury vehicle maintenance in Los Angeles." "But, Mr. Sullivan," Dylan interjected, "why would you do this? You said yesterday we were a fifth-rate garage." Edward closed his eyes, ashamed of his own words. "I said terrible things yesterday, things my son, my late son, would be ashamed to hear." "Your son?" Michael asked softly. "Ryan died 5 years ago in a car accident. He was 12, same age as Dylan." The room fell into absolute silence. Michael felt his heart tighten. He knew what it was to lose a loved one. He'd lost his wife 3 years ago. "I'm so sorry," Michael said sincerely. "Thank you." Edward breathed deeply. Ryan was passionate about cars. He'd spend hours watching mechanics' videos, disassembling toys to understand how they worked. He wanted to be a mechanical engineer when he grew up. Dylan felt a lump in his throat. It was exactly what he wanted. "When I saw your son yesterday," Edward continued, his voice breaking, "the way he works, the passion in his eyes, the precision in his movements, I saw Ryan. I saw what my son could have been if he'd had the chance to grow." Tears started rolling down Edward's face, a man who hadn't cried in years, who'd built an armor of coldness and arrogance to avoid feeling the pain of loss. "That's why I want to invest," he said, wiping his eyes, unashamed. "I can't bring my son back, but I can help another father give his son the opportunities I never got to give mine." Michael was crying now too. 2 widowers, 2 fathers who knew the pain of loss, sitting in a luxury room sharing a grief that money could never cure. "Mr. Sullivan," Michael said, his voice trembling, "I don't know what to say." "Say you accept. Say you'll let me do this not for me, but for Dylan, for his extraordinary talent." Dylan looked at his father, awaiting his decision. Michael was clearly struggling internally. Pride said to refuse, not accept charity, but love for his son said to accept, give Dylan the opportunities he deserved. Dad, Dylan said softly, remember what you always say, that we can't let pride stand in the way of progress. Michael looked at his son and smiled through tears. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best teacher in the world, Dylan replied, taking his father's hand. Michael breathed deeply and looked at Edward. We have conditions. Of course. What are they? First, my son, keep studying. School comes before the garage always. I completely agree, Edward said. In fact, I want to add that to the contract. Dylan will have a full scholarship to one of the best private schools in Los Angeles. Michael's eyes widened. You'd do that? I would. Talent without education is a waste. Dylan needs a strong theoretical foundation to complement his practical skills. Second condition, Michael continued, we keep control of operations. You invest, but don't interfere in the day-to-day. Perfect. I don't know mechanics as well as you. It'd be foolish for me to interfere. Third condition, Michael said more seriously now, if you ever treat my son disrespectfully again, the deal ends that instant, no matter how much money's involved. Edward extended his hand. You have my word, and if I break it, you can keep everything garage equipment, clients all. Michael shook his hand, feeling he was making a deal that would change everything. So, do we have a deal? Edward asked. We have a deal, Michael replied. Dylan smiled, that wide, genuine smile of a kid who still believed the world could be good. Excellent, Edward said, picking up the documents. I'll have my lawyer prepare the contracts. Meanwhile, I want you to make a list of everything you need, tools, equipment, renovations, no value limit. I want to start as soon as possible. Mr. Sullivan, Dylan said, can I ask a question? Sure. Why did you change? Yesterday you were different. Edward smiled sadly. My daughter Caroline said something to me last night. She said before you became this cold, calculating person, you were a good man. Ryan would be proud. And would he be? Dylan asked with the brutal honesty only kids have. Of the man I was yesterday, no, but of the man I'm trying to be today, I hope so. At that moment, the door opened and Caroline entered without knocking. At 17, she had her father's determination but a heart not yet hardened by life. Dad, I heard they were here and, oh. She stopped seeing Michael and Dylan. Sorry, I didn't know you were still in a meeting. It's okay, Caroline. Come, I want to introduce you. This is Michael Sanders and his son Dylan. Caroline approached and shook both their hands with a genuine smile. Pleasure to meet you in person. I'm your biggest fan, Dylan. I watched the video like 20 times. Dylan blushed. Thanks. You're amazing. At 12, doing things experienced mechanics can't. How did you learn all that? My dad taught me. Dylan replied, always giving credit to his father. Caroline looked at Michael with respect. And you're the real genius here. Michael shook his head, embarrassed. No, Dylan's the one with a special gift. You two are special, Caroline said. And Dad, are you really investing in their garage? I am, Edward replied, and there was pride in his voice. Caroline hugged her father, something she hadn't done in months. I'm proud of you, Dad. You're doing the right thing. Edward felt his eyes fill with tears again. He hadn't realized how much he needed his daughter's approval until that moment. Dylan, Caroline said, turning her attention to the boy, can I ask a favor? Sure. Could you teach me about mechanics, about cars? I've always wanted to learn, but my dad never... I never thought you were interested, Edward interrupted, surprised. Dad, I always was, but you always said that's not for ladies, remember? Edward felt ashamed, another of his prejudiced attitudes exposed. I'd love to teach you, Dylan said, smiling. My dad always says shared knowledge is multiplied knowledge. Your dad's very wise, Caroline said, looking at Michael with admiration. Michael was red from a mix of embarrassment and pride. He'd never received so much positive attention in his life. Well, Edward said, standing, I think we have a lot of work ahead. Michael, Dylan, how about lunch together? We can discuss project details while we eat. Mr. Sullivan, we're not dressed appropriately for a fine restaurant, Michael said, looking at his own clothes. Then let's eat somewhere casual. I know a great spot that serves home-cooked food. No pretensions. Dad, going to a home-cooked restaurant? I gotta photograph that, Caroline joked. They left the office together, the millionaire, his daughter, the mechanic, and the prodigy kid. To the employees who saw them pass, they were just 4 people, but for each of them it was the start of something that would change their lives completely. Saturday morning started with Caroline Sullivan arriving at Sanders & Son at 7:30 sharp, wearing old jeans and a simple t-shirt, probably the cheapest clothes she owned. Her hair was in a ponytail and she had a backpack. Michael and Dylan were already working. Their routine started at 6 a.m. every day, no exceptions. "Good morning," she called from the door a bit shy, seeing the garage interior for the first time. Dylan came out from under an old Chevy wiping his hands on a rag. "Caroline, you really came." "Of course I did. I promised, didn't I?" Michael approached too, wiping his hands. "Good morning, Caroline. Does your dad know you're here?" "Yes, actually, he sent this." She pulled a thermal bag from her backpack. "Breakfast. He said you probably work from early without eating properly." Michael opened the bag and found fresh bagels, ham, cheese, orange juice, and fruit. It was more food than he and Dylan ate in a whole week. This is very kind," he said, touched by the gesture. "My dad's trying," Caroline explained. "Last night he wouldn't stop talking about you about plans for the garage. I haven't seen him this excited in years." They had an impromptu breakfast at an old table in the garage corner. While eating, Dylan explained to Caroline about the cars they were fixing. 3 in total, all popular models with simple issues. "This Chevy's Mr. Bennett's," Dylan pointed. "He's a taxi driver. It had a starter motor problem. A new part cost $200, but I found a used one in good shape for $50. He doesn't have much to pay." "Do you give discounts to people who can't afford it?" Caroline asked. "We charge what's fair," Michael explained. "Mr. Bennett works hard. I'm not going to charge him the same as someone who can afford more. But don't you lose money that way." "Money we can always make more," Michael said simply. "Dignity and a clear conscience are priceless." Caroline looked at those 2 men, father and son, who had so little but gave so much, and felt ashamed of how she'd always lived surrounded by luxury but empty of purpose. "Can I help?" she asked. "Sure." Dylan perked up. "Come, I'll teach you the basics." They spent the whole morning working together. Dylan was patient, explaining every tool, every component, every procedure. Caroline learned fast and wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty, literally. In 2 hours, she was covered in grease and sweat, but smiling more than she had in months. "This is incredible," she said after helping Dylan change the oil in a car. "It's so real, not theory in books, it's hands-on." "That's why I love it," Dylan said. "Every car is a different problem, a new challenge, like solving puzzles, but puzzles that help real people." Michael watched the 2 young people working and smiled. Dylan had always been solitary. Schoolmates found him weird for preferring engines over video games, but there he was, animated, teaching, making a friend. Around noon, a black Mercedes-Benz pulled up in front of the garage. It was a recent model, impeccable, completely out of the standard for the cars that usually showed up there. A man in his 50s got out expensive suit, arrogant posture. It was Arthur Vance, one of Edward's partners, who'd witnessed the Rolls-Royce scene. "Excuse me," he said, entering the garage like he was stepping on trash. "I'm looking for the so-called prodigy kid." Dylan stood up, recognizing the man immediately. "That's me, sir." Arthur looked Dylan up and down with poorly disguised disdain. "So you're really the kid who went viral fixing Edward's car?" "Yes, sir. Can I help you? Can you—" "My Mercedes has a strange noise in the engine. I've taken it to 3 specialized shops and no one could figure it out." "And you came here?" Michael asked, surprised. "I came to test if the kid's really good or if it was just luck with the Rolls-Royce." The way he said luck made it clear he was there to challenge, not really ask for help. "I can take a look," Dylan said calmly. "How much do you charge?" "Depends on the problem, but first I need to diagnose." Arthur tossed the keys to Dylan with disdain. "Let's see what you can do." Dylan caught the keys and went to the Mercedes. He started the engine and listened carefully, head slightly tilted, eyes closed. After a minute, he turned it off and opened the hood. "How long to figure it out?" Arthur asked, ostentatiously, checking his watch. "I already did," Dylan replied. "The problem's in the alternator belt tensioner. It's loose, so the belt vibrates and makes noise. It's not serious yet, but if not fixed, it'll damage the belt and could cause bigger issues." Arthur was silent, clearly surprised. "How do you know that?" "From the sound. The belt vibration has a specific frequency. I learned to identify it by listening." "And can you fix it?" "I can, but not here. I need specific equipment to adjust the tensioner precisely. If I do it wrong, it could worsen." "So, you can't fix it," Arthur said with a victorious smile as if he'd proven Dylan was a fraud. "I didn't say that. I said I can't fix it here with the equipment we have now, but I can recommend a Mercedes specialized shop with the right tools. Or you can wait a few weeks until our renovation's done." "A few weeks? What renovation?" It was Michael who answered. "We're partnering with Edward Sullivan. He's investing in modernizing the garage." Arthur's expression changed completely. "Edward's investing here $500,000 initial." Arthur was visibly disturbed by the info. "Edward didn't tell me anything about this." "Maybe because it's none of your business," Caroline said, emerging from the back of the garage with an unfriendly face. She'd recognized Arthur immediately. He dined at their house often and always gave her that invasive look that made her uncomfortable. "Caroline!" Arthur's eyes widened. "What are you doing here, and in that state?" He looked at her grease-covered hands and she smiled proudly. "I'm learning mechanics. Any problem? Does your dad know you're here? He knows and approves, unlike you, who apparently came here to quality test like you own the truth." Arthur turned red with rage. "Caroline, this isn't the place for you. Come on, I'll take you home." "No, thanks, I'm fine here." "Caroline, I insist." "And I refuse. Now, if you don't need Dylan's services anymore, please remove your car. There are other customers waiting." It was a lie. There was no one waiting, but Caroline had learned to use her father's authoritative tone when needed. Arthur looked at everyone there, the prodigy kid, the mechanic father, and his partner's daughter completely comfortable in that humble environment, and felt something he didn't expect. Envy. Envy of the simplicity, the authenticity, the genuine connection these people had. "How much do I owe for the consultation?" he asked Dylan, pulling out his wallet. "You don't owe anything. Diagnosing isn't a service, it's courtesy." "Courtesy?" Arthur repeated incredulous. "Yes, sir. You'll only pay if I actually fix something." Arthur pulled out $200 and placed it on the counter. "Then this is for the honesty. Seems like it's in short supply in the world." Dylan took the money but didn't feel happy about it. It seemed more like an insult disguised as praise. Arthur left the garage, got in the Mercedes, and drove off without looking back. As soon as the car disappeared, Caroline exploded. "What a horrible man. He's always been like that, arrogant, thinking he's better than everyone." "You know him well?" Michael asked. "Unfortunately, he's been my dad's partner for 10 years. Always fake, always trying to take advantage." "Why is your dad partners with him then?" Dylan asked. "Because Arthur's good at making money, but that doesn't make him a good person." Michael put the $200 in the drawer. "Well, at least he paid. Money's money no matter who it comes from." "Dad's right," Dylan agreed. "We can't choose customers by personality." They went back to work, but Arthur's visit had left a bitter taste in the air. Caroline especially was worried. She knew Arthur enough to know he didn't do anything without ulterior motives. At the end of the afternoon, as Caroline was getting ready to leave, Edward arrived at the garage. He was driving himself rare for him and had a worried expression. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Caroline asked. "I need to talk to Michael privately." Michael looked at Dylan and Caroline. "Can you two take a walk? Get ice cream or something?" Dylan was about to protest, but Caroline took his arm. "Come on, my treat. Let them talk." When they were alone, Edward got straight to the point. "Arthur was here today?" "He was. How do you know?" "He called me. Said he's concerned about my investment in a back-alley garage without proper structure." Michael felt rage rising. "Back-alley garage. He came here to test Dylan, and my son diagnosed his Mercedes problem in a minute." "I know. I'm not questioning your competence. I'm warning you that Arthur's going to try to sabotage our partnership." "Sabotage? Why?" "Because Arthur doesn't like when I do something without consulting him first, and because he envies anything good that happens to others." "What can he do?" Edward sighed. "He has influence, knows people in the auto sector, regulatory bodies, suppliers. If he wants to make it hard for you to get certifications, parts, permits, he can." Michael sat down, feeling the weight of reality. "Then you're saying our partnership is threatened before it starts?" "No. I'm saying it'll be harder than we imagined, but not impossible." "Edward, look around. I have debts, old equipment customers who can barely pay. If your partner decides to destroy me, he can easily." "Not if I don't let him," Edward said with determination. "Arthur's my partner, but that doesn't mean he bosses me. I've made my decision. I'm investing in your garage and no one's stopping me. But what if it affects your business? What if you lose money because of me? Michael, I have more money than I can spend in 3 lifetimes. I can lose a few million and not feel a difference in my lifestyle. But you'll feel every dollar of this investment. You'll turn this into something meaningful. How can you be so sure? Because I saw Dylan work. I saw how you raised him. I saw the values you have. I've invested millions in companies that looked promising on paper but failed because the people behind them had no character. You do, and that's worth more than any business plan. Michael felt his eyes fill with tears. Why do you trust us so much? Because you reminded me what really matters. You gave me hope again. Because Edward paused, voice breaking, helping you is how I've found to honor my son. Ryan would love to meet Dylan. He'd love to see a talented kid getting the opportunities he never had. The 2 men sat in silence for a moment, each processing their emotions. So, what do we do about Arthur? Michael asked finally. We do our work so well that even he can't deny the quality. We'll make this garage so good that when people hear Sanders & Son, they think excellence. That'll take time. We have time, we have talent, and now we have resources. It's enough. Edward extended his hand again. We're in this together. Michael shook it firmly. We are. When Dylan and Caroline returned from ice cream, they found the 2 men smiling and discussing renovation plans. Everything sorted? Caroline asked. Everything sorted, Edward confirmed. By the way, I brought something for you. He went to the car and came back with a huge box. Dylan, this is for you. Dylan opened the box, his eyes widening. It was technical manuals, dozens of them, for every luxury car brand imaginable: Ferrari, Lamborghini, Porsche, Bentley, Aston Martin. Some were rare editions, others recent updates costing hundreds each. This must have cost a fortune, Michael said, mouth agape. It did, but seeing Dylan's face now is priceless. Dylan flipped through the manuals with reverence like sacred treasures. Thank you, Edward. Really, thank you. No, Dylan. Thank you for reminding me why I got into this business so many years ago. It wasn't for the money, it was the passion for machines, the desire to understand how things work. Caroline watched her father interact with Dylan and Michael and noticed a change in him. His shoulders were less tense, his smile more genuine. His eyes had a sparkle she hadn't seen in years. These 2 humble mechanics were doing for her father what years of therapy couldn't, making him feel human again. Dad, she said, I think this was the best decision you've made. I think so too, daughter. I think so too. That night, after Edward and Caroline left, Michael and Dylan stayed late at the garage studying the new manuals. The dim light from the single bulb illuminated their heads bent over the books, father and son soaking up knowledge like sponges. Dad, Dylan said at one point, do you think what Edward's hoping for? Michael looked at his son. 12 years old, tired eyes but full of determination, small hands but skilled beyond his age. Son, we've already achieved something many people never do in a lifetime. What? We got someone to believe in us, and when someone believes, everything becomes possible. Dylan smiled and went back to studying. He had so much to learn, so much to do, so much to prove, but for the first time he felt he had the right tools, not just physical ones, but emotional too. He had a father who supported him, a mentor who believed in him, and a friend who saw him as equal. The future was still uncertain. Arthur Vance posed a real threat. The garage renovation would be a huge challenge. The new school would be a tough adjustment, but none of that mattered now because for the first time, Dylan Sanders believed he could be more than a poor kid from a neighborhood garage. He could be an engineer, an entrepreneur, a teacher. He could be anything he dreamed. And dreams, when fueled by hard work and supported by the right people, have a strange way of becoming reality. Dylan had never felt as happy as on his first Monday at Crestwood Academy. The new uniform still smelled fresh. His backpack full of notebooks without a single line written, and the wide hallways seemed a world apart from the public school he'd attended before. In physics class, the teacher presented a complex problem on thermodynamics applied to combustion engines. Dylan solved it in 3 minutes, leaving the whole class silent. "Impressive, Dylan," the teacher said. "You really understand this deeply." During recess, classmates approached curiously. "You're the kid from the video, right? The one who fixed the Rolls-Royce?" For the first time, Dylan felt accepted, admired. The joy lasted until 11:15 a.m. when his phone vibrated with a call from Michael. "Dad?" he answered, stepping out of the classroom. "Everything okay?" The voice that replied was shaky, broken. "Son, the garage was shut down." Dylan's world stopped. "What? How shut down? City inspection came half an hour ago. They said we have structural irregularities, no proper permits, equipment, not up to code." Michael paused, and Dylan heard the desperation in his breathing. "Son, they sealed everything. We can't work or even enter." "But that doesn't make sense. The garage has always run fine." "I know, but they have documents, official seals. They say someone filed an anonymous complaint." Dylan felt rage boiling. Anonymous complaint. Arthur Vance. It has to be him. "Dad, have you called Edward?" "I called him. He's coming." "But Dylan—" Michael's voice cracked. "Without the garage, we have nothing. Customers will leave. Debts continue. Everything's gonna be okay, Dad. I'm coming back now." "No, stay at school. Education comes first." "But, Dad, stay. Please let me handle this." Dylan hung up heartbroken. He couldn't focus on any more classes. At 3 p.m. when school ended, he ran to the bus stop. When he got off near the garage, what he saw made him stop dead. There was a crowd. At least 50 people gathered in front of Sanders & Son, holding signs, shouting, protesting. The garage was sealed with yellow tape, but the people didn't care. "Justice for Dylan," the sign said. "Talent isn't a crime. Let the garage operate." Dylan approached, stunned. He recognized Mrs. Beatrice, the Chevy customer, tears in her eyes, Mr. Arnold, the bakery owner, Mrs. Lucia, retired teacher. Dozens of neighborhood people he'd known all his life. Dylan, Mrs. Beatrice ran to hug him. "My boy, what an injustice." "Mrs. Beatrice, what's all this? When we heard they closed the garage, we organized. You and your dad have helped everyone here for years, fixed our cars when we had no money. Now it's our turn to help you." Dylan felt his eyes fill with tears. For years he'd felt invisible, just another poor kid doing what he could. But these people had seen. They cared. He entered the garage, crossing the closure tape. Michael was sitting on a bench, head in hands, while Edward talked to a suited man, noting everything on a tablet. "Dylan?" Edward saw him. "You should be at school." "I couldn't stay. Not when my dad's losing everything." Michael lifted his head, eyes red. "Son." Dylan hugged his father tightly, feeling him tremble. "We'll fix this, Dad. Together." Edward approached. "I already know who's behind this." "Arthur," Dylan said. It wasn't a question. Arthur used contacts in the city hall, paid inspectors to find irregularities. Technically, it's all legal. The garage really didn't have all permits updated, but the timing was absurdly fast, clearly orchestrated. "And now," Michael asked hopelessly, "now we fight. I brought Julian." He pointed to the lawyer, specialist in administrative law. "We'll challenge every irregularity, prove bad faith in the inspection, but that'll take weeks, and meanwhile we can't work." "I'll cover the expenses," Edward said. "I'm a partner. Remember, if the garage closes, I lose too." Caroline ran in, phone in hand. "Dad, you have to see this." She showed the screen. It was a video going viral, filmed from the crowd. It showed Mrs. Beatrice speaking to the camera. "These men, Michael and Dylan Sanders, are heroes in this neighborhood. When my car broke down and I had no money, they fixed it for free. This garage isn't just business, it's hope for people with nowhere else to go." The video already had 500,000 views. "People are on our side," Caroline said. "All of America is seeing this injustice." Dylan looked out the window. The crowd had grown. Now there were TV cameras, reporters, cars honking in support. "This is what happens when you touch real lives," Edward said. "You matter to a lot of people." Julian closed his tablet. "I have good news. I got an emergency injunction. A judge agreed to review it priority considering the social impact. Hearing tomorrow at 10 a.m. "Tomorrow?" Michael's eyes widened. When there's public interest, justice can be fast, and with this commotion, he pointed outside, no judge wants to be the villain. The door burst open. Arthur Vance entered with 2 security guards. "Edward, we need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about anymore." "Yes, we do, about you destroying our company for this ridiculous project." "Watch your next words," Edward said, his voice dangerous. "Or what you'll hit me," Arthur laughed. "You're pathetic. Since your son died, you've been a shadow. Now you found this kid and think you can make up for it. News flash. Ryan's dead. No charity will bring him back. The silence was absolute. Edward turned pale, trembling. It was Michael who stood, placing himself between them. "Get out of my garage." "Your garage," Arthur cackled. "This dump's sealed." "I said get out." Arthur invaded Michael's space. "You, a failed mechanic who barely—" He didn't finish. Dylan, 12 years old, 5 feet tall, stood in front of his father, facing Arthur. "You don't talk to my dad like that." The bravery caught Arthur off guard. "Move, kid." "No, my dad is worth more than you'll ever be. He taught me honesty, hard work, dignity. What do you teach? How to destroy people out of envy." "Envy of you." Arthur laughed nervously. "I have millions. Why would I envy a greasy neighborhood kid? Because I have something money can't buy," Dylan replied firmly. "People who truly love me. A father who'd give his life for me. Friends who came to defend our garage. What do you have? Paid guards and a rotten reputation." The crowd outside erupted in applause. Arthur turned red. "You'll regret this." "No, he won't." Edward finally spoke, standing beside Dylan. "Because tomorrow I'll present proof you bribed inspectors. I have recordings, transfers, witnesses. You'll lose everything." Arthur paled. "You have no proof." Edward played an audio on his phone. Arthur's voice. "I need you to create difficulties for Sanders & Son. How much to find serious irregularities?" The blood drained from Arthur's face. "Where did you get that? An inspector you tried to bribe has a conscience. He recorded everything. So you're leaving now, signing papers, withdrawing objections, and selling your share of the company. In exchange, I won't hand this to the federal prosecutor." "You can't." "I can, because if not tomorrow, you'll be arrested for corruption. And with this public visibility, no lawyer saves you." Arthur was cornered. "This isn't over." "It is. Now go and never approach this family again." Arthur left under boos from the crowd. Michael sat legs failing. "You really have that proof?" "I do. I investigated Arthur a week ago. Found much worse things." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed to be sure and I didn't want you worrying." Dylan looked at Edward with admiration. "You risked everything for us." "I did the right thing. Arthur's been poisoning my company for years. You gave me the courage to face him." Caroline hugged her father, crying, "I'm so proud." The next morning the hearing was quick. With the recordings, the judge suspended the closure and ordered an investigation against the inspectors. Sanders & Son was freed, but when they left the courthouse, over 200 people were waiting. Old customers, neighborhood residents, Crestwood, students, journalists. When they saw Michael and Dylan, they exploded in applause. Justice was done. Dylan, Dylan, Dylan. Dylan looked at that crowd and felt something new belonging to something bigger, knowing his talent had touched real people. Michael hugged him, crying, "We did it, son." "No, Dad, you did it. You raised me right, taught me everything. You gave me reason to keep going. After Mom died, you were my only reason." Edward watched from afar with Caroline. "He reminds me so much of Ryan. But Dylan's not Ryan, he's someone new you're helping, and that's beautiful in its own way. I wasted 5 years, closed in grief. I thought honoring Ryan meant never moving on. Now I know honoring Ryan means doing exactly this, helping talented kids. It's what my son would have wanted." 3 months later, Sanders & Son was unrecognizable. The small space had been expanded, taking over 2 neighboring units, state-of-the-art equipment, hydraulic lifts, diagnostic computers, everything a mechanic could dream of. The new sign said Sanders & Son Automotive Excellence Center in partnership with Sullivan Imports, where talent meets opportunity. The grand opening drew hundreds. Dylan, in a new uniform, gave the presentation. "This garage was always more than work. It's where I learned knowledge transforms lives, where my dad taught me honesty is worth more than profit, where I discovered talent doesn't need money, just opportunity." Applause echoed. "Today, we're opening not just a renovated garage but a training center. We'll offer free courses for neighborhood youth, scholarships for the best. We'll prove opportunity changes destinies." Michael approached the mic shyly. "I'm not good with words, but I want to thank the one who changed our lives. Edward Sullivan could have kept laughing at my son, but he chose to see beyond prejudice. He chose to believe." "Thank you, my friend." Edward stepped up emotional. "I'm the one who thanks you. You saved me from myself. You reminded me why life is worth living. He looked to the sky. "Ryan, wherever you are, I hope you're proud." At day's end, when the crowd dispersed, Edward, Caroline, Michael, and Dylan sat in the new office. Glass walls, air conditioning, modern computers. "I can't believe this is real," Dylan said. "It's real because you earned it," Edward replied. "Every piece of equipment here you conquered with talent." Caroline returned with a box. "Dylan, Dad asked me to save this for you." Dylan opened it and found old but impeccable tools. "They were Ryan's," Edward explained, voice breaking. "He got them when he turned 10. I kept them after we lost him, but I think he'd like you to have them." Dylan held a small wrench. "Mr. Edward, I can't." "Yes, you can, because you'll use them to do what Ryan dreamed of. Fix the world. One machine at a time." Dylan hugged the tools to his chest. "I'll take care of them, I promise. They're yours now, and Ryan's happy knowing his legacy continues." They stayed there for hours, talking about dreams, future plans. "Dylan," Edward said, "where do you see yourself in 10 years? Graduated in mechanical engineering, expanded this center to other cities. No talented kid left behind for lack of opportunity. And you'll do it, I'm sure." Michael stood extending his hand. "To true partners." Edward shook it. "To true friends." Dylan and Caroline joined 4 hands together. "To talents that transform lives," Caroline said. "To second chances," Dylan completed. Outside, the sun set over Los Angeles. In that little corner in a garage saved from destruction, 4 people had proven goodness beats cruelty, talent overcomes prejudice, and love can change the world. Dylan looked at Ryan's tools and made a silent promise. He'd honor that gift by being the best version of himself. Not just for him, but for all who believed. Because in the end, the grease-covered kid ridiculed one ordinary morning had proven the most important lesson. Talent doesn't need wealth to shine, it just needs an opportunity. And when that opportunity meets hard work, humility, and a pure heart, no force can stop success. The following months were of complete transformation. The garage became a reference not just in the neighborhood but across the city. Clients with luxury cars lined up to be serviced by Dylan and Michael, but they never abandoned old customers. Mr. Bennett still brought his taxi, Mrs. Beatrice her Chevy, and all received the same dignified treatment. Caroline became an integral part of the team. She studied automotive mechanics with obsessive dedication, and Dylan was a patient teacher. In the afternoons after her high school classes, she'd arrive at the garage and work until closing. Their relationship had evolved from friendship to something deeper. They were like siblings united by shared love for machines and mutual respect. "You know what's best about this," Caroline said one day as they cleaned up after a long day. "It's not just learning mechanics, it's discovering I can be more than a rich entrepreneur's daughter. I can be someone useful." "You were always useful," Dylan replied. "You just needed to find your purpose, and you helped me find mine, just like you helped my dad find his again." Edward had changed completely. The coldness that defined him since Ryan's death was gone. He spent less time at Sullivan Import's office and more at the garage. Not because he needed to supervise, but because he genuinely enjoyed being there. He'd regained the passion that drew him to the auto world in the first place. One afternoon, watching Dylan work on a Ferrari, Edward felt a familiar presence. It was as if Ryan was there smiling, proud to see his father had finally found peace. "You okay, Dad?" Caroline approached, noticing tears in Edward's eyes. "I'm more than okay, daughter. For the first time in 5 years, I'm whole." The first anniversary of the partnership was marked with a special ceremony. Dylan had finished his first year at Crestwood Academy with the top grades in his class. At 13, he'd already given several talks on automotive mechanics at public schools, inspiring hundreds of youth to pursue dreams regardless of circumstances. "Ladies and gentlemen," Edward announced to an audience of over 300 in the rented event hall. "A year ago, I met a kid who taught me a person's true value isn't in their bank account but in their character. Dylan Sanders didn't just save my car that day, he saved me." The crowd applauded as Dylan took the stage, still shy with so much attention. "Today," Edward continued, "I want to announce our project's expansion. Sanders & Son will open 3 new training centers in different LA neighborhoods. Each will offer free automotive mechanics courses for low-income youth. Because if there's one Dylan in this neighborhood, there are hundreds more across the city waiting for their chance." The ovation was deafening. Michael cried in the front row, unable to believe how his life had changed. from an indebted mechanic about to lose everything, now co-owner of a thriving, respected company. But more than money or success, what he valued most was seeing his son happy, fulfilled, with a bright future ahead. That night, after the celebration, the four, Edward, Caroline, Michael, and Dylan, went to the rooftop of the renovated garage building. Los Angeles stretched before them, millions of lights twinkling in the dark. "Remember the day we met?" Edward asked. "How could I forget?" Dylan laughed. "You thought I was a fraud." "And I thought you were arrogant and impossible," Michael added. "I was," Edward admitted shamelessly. "But you held up a mirror I didn't want to see. You showed me I'd become someone Ryan wouldn't recognize." "Dad," Caroline said, taking his hand, "Ryan would be proud of the man you are now. I am proud." Edward hugged his daughter, then opened his arms to include Michael and Dylan. The four stayed there, embraced, looking at the city that had witnessed their transformation. "You know what I learned this year," Michael said. "That family doesn't always come from blood, sometimes from circumstances, fate, the will of two strangers to see beyond differences." "We're not strangers anymore," Edward said. "We're family, and families support, care for, grow together." Dylan looked at the city lights and thought of all the kids out there in poor neighborhoods with talent but no opportunity. He thought how one moment a broken car, a risky bet, an extended hand had changed not just his life but so many others. "I'll dedicate my life to this," he said with conviction, "to finding those kids with talent but no voice, giving them what you gave me." "You won't do it alone," Caroline said. "I'm with you." "We're with you," Edward corrected. "This is just the beginning." The years passed. Dylan graduated from Crestwood with honors. He got a full scholarship to study mechanical engineering at MIT. At 22, he received the National Award for Best Mechanical Engineering Student. On stage, prize in hand, he thanked, "My dad Michael, who taught me everything, Edward Sullivan, who gave me opportunities, and Ryan, who, though not here, inspired me to never give up." Sanders & Son had 12 locations in Los Angeles. Each offered free courses, employed neighborhood youth, keeping the philosophy, profit matters but dignity is priceless. Michael ran the company alongside Edward. They were more than partners, brothers. Caroline became a mechanical engineer working at Sullivan Imports but spending weekends at the garage teaching for free. And Dylan became exactly what everyone believed. Not just a brilliant mechanic but an exceptional human using his talent to uplift others. Because that cruel bet had turned into America's most beautiful redemption story. And whenever Dylan was asked his best fix, he'd say, "Not the Rolls-Royce, it was fixing a man's heart who'd forgotten how to love. And in return, he fixed my whole life." In the original garage now, a museum and training center, a plaque on the wall read, "Here it all began." Where a kid proved talent knows no bounds, where a man found redemption, where a family was born from the unlikeliest circumstances. May this place always remember one opportunity can change the world. And every day hundreds of youth passed through that door, looked at the plaque and dared to dream, because if Dylan Sanders could do it, so could they. And that in the end was the true fix, not of cars but hopes, not engines but lives, not machines but destinies. To add a touch of American spirit, Dylan later started a nonprofit called Gear Up America, partnering with tech companies like Tesla to provide apprenticeships for underprivileged kids, blending classic mechanics with electric vehicle innovation, ensuring the American dream of mobility extended to all. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more real stories that celebrate kindness, talent, and second chances.